From the MLB to the NBA, ESPN is killing major sports, and now they're using the SEC to do that to college football. This is Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Christmas Eve, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Big 12. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. Thank you for making this show your first listen every single day. Donned in my Arizona State hoodie from @CommitToTheFork from Twitter. Sent it my way this Christmas to root for the Sun Devils in the playoff. And that playoff is broadcast on ESPN, but for how long? They are falling apart after failed contracts across the board. We'll talk about that at the start. Also, transfer portal issues across the Big 12. Utah losing players to BYU. Kansas State behind the punch, Texas Tech leading the way, and then Deion Sanders. Is he staying in Colorado? Why hasn't he announced anything different yet? If you hit subscribe, I get to keep my job. TJ Pittenger of College Football Addiction joins the show today. We go back and forth. Let's ride.
Drake, ESPN has certainly fallen under fire right now, and even some personalities at ESPN are cautiously, because they'll just fire you if you don't toe the company line, calling out some of their employees, calling out some of what's going on at the four-letter network. Let's just open it up wide open forum to start us off talking about ESPN with all this college playoff committee and bowl and playoff controversy.
ESPN is a failing network, and they have endlessly killed the sports that we love. So here's a great example of that. MLB down. Viewership so far down the last 10, 15 years that youth baseball in the last 5 is down 20% in participation. They're killing the sport at the top level. People are stopping to watch it. It's becoming even more boring the more ESPN has control over it. So much so that kids don't want to play it anymore. The NBA, 42% down in the last decade. This year, historic lows in viewership. Guess who has the tightest grip on the NBA? You watch it on Christmas Day? That's ESPN. The more they take major products under their wing, they destroy them. And now the college football is under their wing, but not just college football, the SEC namely. They're creating yet another major entity to destroy the whole. NFL, awesome. Great product. People watch it. Legendary numbers year in and year out. The Super Bowl grows and grows no matter who's in it. Small market Kansas City team wins it, and people from all over the world watch. Why? ESPN has no control over the National Football League. None whatsoever. So that product has thrived. Whereas the greed of those 4 letters poured into college football has killed anything that we love about the amateurism of the sport. It has created the conference realignment that's taken your favorite matchup, your favorite team, completely out of the national equation. It has created these pundits like Kirk Herbstreit who sit in front of a microphone or in front of a camera with a microphone and say, we should stop talking about wins. It creates sellouts, schmucks who all they want is the money that's in their pocket. They want to, I said this the other day, they want to double click the side of their phone, the facial recognition, and then bam, the debit card shows up. And as long as that debit card's got money in it from ESPN, they'll continue to say whatever that machine wants. And the SEC is the new MLB. It's the new NBA. It's the new project for ESPN. And the more they have a grip over it, the closer we are to the death of what we know and love about college football.
Yeah, it's so funny to watch, too, because obviously the SEC is very much in bed with them. And I don't know if you saw the recent Greg Sankey interview with Dellinger, but he literally said when we were setting up this playoff system, we were setting it up in 2019 and 2020 for 4 equitable conferences. We didn't know that, and he was obviously, whining and moaning about Bama not being left out and this, that, and the other. We said we didn't know that this would be our situation. And then the very next offseason, he literally went and grabbed the 2 biggest brands available in Texas and Oklahoma and changed the sport in a massive way, like you just talked about with realignment, which we love realignment. Like it's fun for us. It gets great views and all these other things. But you can't have on one hand, hey, we made this playoff for this, that, and the other, and then literally ruin that by your greed. And that's exactly what it is. ESPN is so far in bed with the SEC and is using that as their money driving force, these billion-dollar TV contracts that they have signed, and they're all complicit. You mentioned Herbstreit. They all toed the, Dinich, obviously. They literally made a college football playoff reporter who used to work for the ACC. They realized that's not a good investment, so they moved her over to report for only the college football playoff, and then she opines on, I think this is what may happen next. And then we see that every week from the committee. So I don't know. It just seems like such an incestuous, such an in-bed relationship that is not going anywhere until they just kill it.
How about Tuesday nights during the fall, the late half of the football season? What channel do you turn on to watch the college football playoff selection?
ESPN every time.
There it is. That is the grip they have on this. They're broadcasting every little piece of this. And what's insane to me even more so, these big round 2 matchups, those are the ones exclusively on ESPN. What they want to create is the better, the bigger. How do we get the best of the so TNT? Okay, they're going to have a couple of these matchups that are blowouts in round 1. They won't get that much viewership. Oh, round 2, we'll make sure we get Ohio State and Oregon. That's going to be the big one. And so while Fox may have carried that game earlier this year, or CBS or NBC or whoever, our turn. We're going to get this one today. It is all intentional. So what I want to be noted, and this is for the SEC too, Greg Sankey, he is not saying these things just to blow hot air up your skirt. There is intentionality here. There is an end goal for the SEC, whether that is a super conference with the Big Ten, whether that is their own college football playoff, they do it themselves. There's something going on where he wants, it's not a conspiracy. He has his own interest, best interest right now, paramount above all else. College football, it means nothing to him. Money is where he wants to go. For ESPN, it's the same thing. This rhetoric that you're hearing, everything they do is very intentional. What they're trying to get you to buy into and build this whole cohort of SEC mafia of general fans that they want everybody else to, you're stupid if you don't think the SEC is number one and our baby. That is all headed toward one direction. And that direction is taking out the ACC, taking out the Big 12, taking out Maryland or Illinois or Purdue or Boise State and Oklahoma in 2007. That will become an impossibility in the future because ESPN wants to create what the NFL has, 30 teams. 32 teams. They want to create a professional aspect of college football that will kill what we know about the game. And the reason they're going to do it is for money. And guess what? They had that with the MLB, 30 teams. They had that with the NBA. And they completely ruined those products. The second they got their paws on it, gone. So CBS, when SEC was on CBS, felt like the spirit of the game was withheld. We had, with NBC has the NFL on Sunday nights. The spirit of the game was upheld. Today, it's about money and solely money. And that was the one thing we kept so long out of college football. Today, it's not. So ESPN, they have control of the entire committee. They're athletic directors. How about this, TJ? The guy who runs the committee is the athletic director at Michigan. You understand ESPN pays Michigan money every time Ohio State wins a playoff game. That's who, that every time, I don't care if he's the athletic director of Michigan, that guy, Ward Manuel, is looking toward Ohio State and saying, gosh, I hope you win, because the second you do, we are paid money. Our conference gets money, and that goes in my pocket. So who do you think that guy wants to be in the college football playoff? Not Boise State, not Arizona State, not BYU, but schools that put money in his pocket. They are inside traders who are running this game, and those 4 letters are at the very forefront of it.
How bad is this? And let me back up. As somebody who, now I like SEC football. I went to Georgia, Alabama this year. I like watching football, but I also loved Louisville versus Virginia Tech on a Thursday night. I also love watching the Big Ten. The Big 12 was phenomenal this year, and for a long time always has been. I graduated from Liberty. I watched all 12 Liberty games that were played this year. I like college football, and so I'm not I don't not watch the SEC games. I like all of it. But all that said, as a guy who does like all of it, how bad is this for the ACC, the Big 12, part of the Big 10, and then certainly everybody beneath it?
Well, we're expediting the destruction of not just the Big 12 or the ACC, but the Big 10 too, and even the back end of the SEC. You think that ultimately the goal is to have Vanderbilt in a power conference, Arkansas, Mississippi State. There are schools that are taking pieces of the pie, and Greg Sankey's going, shoot, we're winning national championships and we have to give Arkansas this much of the purse. That's completely pointless. It's a brand that doesn't matter for them. They'd much rather have Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan be in that conversation. What we're hurtling towards, the end goal here is to create the most profitable product there is. And what that picture looks like is 30, 32 of the top schools in the country. Maybe Utah or BYU or Oklahoma State can be included in that ultimately, but TCU probably isn't. The Cincinnatis and the Houstons of the world, they're probably not. And in that day and age, again, you've created a professional product that at some point gets old. I get tired of watching Ohio State and Georgia play year in and year out in the college football playoff. And you might be thinking, no, you don't get tired of that. We love competition. But no, after about 6 years of that same Alabama-Clemson matchup, we were begging for Cincinnati to get into that college football playoff just for something different. And I'm telling you, there are enough casual fans that are turning the TV on. That's who pushes this whole deal. The diehards don't. If they did, the Big 12 would be right up there with the best of them. It's the casual fan who goes, number 6 against number 4, I'll turn it on and watch that. It's that kind of fan that's bringing these ratings in for ESPN. And that's the kind of fan that one day will go, this is the 6th year in a row I've seen Georgia play Ohio State. Okay. And when that day comes, you're looking at the same MLB product where when the Yankees play the Dodgers and we're going to get all-star historic ratings, people didn't watch like we thought they would. Or over in the NBA, the Lakers are playing Christmas Day against the Mavericks and Luka Doncic. People are going to watch. You kind of kill. We got bored of that too. They will get bored of college football the more you cut it down, and that's what's happening right now.
The other side of this is that there are some prominent figures speaking up. I don't really know what they do to impact things. People like Ari Wasserman at On3, Tim Brando, legendary voice, Nicole Auerbach of The Athletic, Josh Pate even has kind of spoken about this in a very negative way, saying, no, this isn't necessarily the right way that this should be going. I don't know that those voices do anything or change anything, but at least there's some adults in the room that are saying, pump the brakes just a little bit on what's going on.
Yeah, TJ, I would include TJ Pittenger in that list of names. And here is the problem. As you mentioned, adults in the room. They're not in the room. They're not in the room. The doors have closed. And Josh Pate or Ari Wasserman, they're sitting right outside, and they will continue to be outside of that room as long as they speak out against Pharaoh, as long as they speak out against Caesar. When they are not buying into the power, when they have not sold their soul, like a Kirk Herbstreit, he has become the mouthpiece for this whole deal. And he knows it. He shows up to work the same way Stephen A. does. They say what they're told to say. They get their paycheck. They go home and hang out with their families, and they have no idea. They probably have an idea, but they don't care how they're truly murdering a sport, or at least how we know it. So, TJ, yeah, I love Josh Pate. I love listening to his content, and he plays a pretty good down the middle of saying, look, we know the SEC is the best product in college football. We understand that, but here's how we're over-glorifying it. But that guy, as soon as he gets to, here's how we're over, as soon as he hits the but, he's out of the room. They kick him out. They say, we don't need you anymore. And instead, it's a small cohort of people who are running a network that wants to push a narrative that the actual college football fans will never be included in because they won't promote the machine.
You mentioned some of those other places. It does feel like North Korea there, I'm sure, at Bristol. So,
that's great. What a comparison.
Say that and get out of here. Drake, where can people follow you? Where can they find your work, man?
Yeah, at LO Big 12 or at Drake C. Toll on Twitter and wherever you find your podcast with Locked On Big 12.
Appreciate you, man. It's not all doom and gloom. I'll enjoy the rest of the playoffs, but it is going to be different in the future. I appreciate you, buddy.
I'm not boycotting anybody or anything. I'm going to still watch it. I'm going to be a part of the machine in my own little way, but I hope one day we get back to the root of. I hope one day we get back to the great games between Arkansas and Texas for the national championship, like 67, and we'll never have that ever again.
Appreciate you, man. We'll talk soon. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
All right, cool. Yeah,
so
we went a little long, but.
Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL is headed toward the playoffs, and as the last few weeks of the regular season are still going, it's time to visit FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love being on players to score a touchdown. That's right. I will bet on a player like, say, CeeDee Lamb to score a touchdown in a game for the Dallas Cowboys. And when he scores a touchdown, I win money. And you can bet on team totals. That's how many points a team will score. Over under 21.5 for X team. Yeah, I'll be there to bet on it and so much more. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets every moment. Make it more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Download the FanDuel app and do it today.
Christmas Eve here, and we're going to talk about some presents that have landed at different programs through the transfer portal. How about that for an intro? Drake C. Toll, how you doing, bud?
I'm great, DJ. Happy holidays to everybody out there. Merry Christmas to you as well. And Merry Christmas to a whole lot of Big 12 schools who have attacked the transfer portal, and a couple of them have already taken home coal or found their stockings completely empty.
We'll keep this really, really punny and really, really on brand. Is BYU the Grinch and Utah is kind of all of Whoville right now?
Well, interesting that you start there because Utah has been a bit of a revolving door and not in the worst way. The word that I used earlier this offseason for a couple of Big 12 schools was crisis. And I don't know if Utah is in a crisis necessarily, but they're also not in a spot where their fans are very happy because the second they get a big-time commit out of the transfer portal, one of their players leaves and goes to BYU. Or they figure out, okay, oh, shoot, we got this guy who's committed out of his mission from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And then, nope, he's not anymore. Instead, he's going to go join BYU. That's the Clegg situation they're dealing with right now for a kid who came back and said, wait a second, after my 2 years gone, I now realize that BYU is much more serious about their athletic department, about football, namely. And for Utah, they're fourth in the Big 12 right now per Heartland College Sports in their transfer portal ranking. They got 12 incoming guys, a spattering of a couple of 4-stars in that package as well. Wayshawn Parker is the number one. He is the running back from Washington State, one of the top running backs in the entire portal. But it feels like the second they land a big name, they start to lose guys from their last high school, the last big high school recruiting class that was a top 30 crew for Kyle Whittingham and company, and those guys are mostly departing. They lose one of their best tight end prospects to BYU, and those are situations that Utah did not want to be a part of this offseason. So as big as a couple of their pickups have been through the portal, Blake Cotton is another who I circled, Jackson Jones. They're losing guys to BYU, and even if it's only one or two, they're certainly aware of that. I think the second Utah fans get momentum, they're brought right back down to earth, and I'm not sure what that equals for 2025.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Is certainly they have to be better in 25 than they were in 24, right?
Well, you would hope so. And there have been stories of these schools. I look at Jim Harbaugh at Michigan, who went kind of up and down there at the very beginning. You're thinking, okay, can he consistently win here, wins a national championship? For Kyle Whittingham at Utah, he's gone 7-5 before. He's gone 7-5 in consecutive years and then come back a couple of years later to win a Pac-12 championship. Longevity is the name of the game for a lot of these coaches at not mid-major schools, but outside of that Power 15. We know Ohio State, Alabama, Auburn. Those are tumultuous jobs. So I talked a lot about how a Jimbo Fisher could thrive at West Virginia or a smaller job compared to an A&M where the pressure's so high. At Utah, the pressure's not near as high as it is at a Florida State. So for Kyle Whittingham, he's got an opportunity to work his way back next season. And because he's done this before, I have a lot of confidence he'll do it again in 25.
So the other side of that is BYU. What have you thought about them in the portal overall? And, listen, they were super hot early, kind of tailed off a little bit at the end. With their pickups, can they be right there competing again next year?
Not yet. Look, BYU is behind. They're 15th right now, again, per Heartland College Sports in their transfer portal pickups. But the one thing that I hang on to, if you're a BYU Cougar fan, is you don't really need that many guys. For Baylor, it's the same situation of, hey, most of your key players are back, and you picked up a couple from the high school ranks that are instant impact guys. So while BYU is currently sitting on 4 incoming transfers, only 3 of them have a star rating next to their name. That Carson Ryan one's a big one because he comes from Utah, was a great high school prospect, is a solid tight end, 6'4", 256. I love what they're going to do with him. But outside of that, nobody's jumping off the page for me, though they've only lost really one key guy to the transfer portal right now, a safety who was going to be a contributor next season, was in essence this last year. So I'm not pushing the red button or pulling the fire alarm right now for BYU, but I'm kind of sitting in the middle wondering, post-bowl game, do they attack harder? Because Colorado is also in that boat right now of, this isn't the 40 guys we saw last season from Deion Sanders. Is it because that bowl game looms large and they want to win that? Is there too much focus there? Could be the case for BYU right now. I'm sitting at a solid B minus, middle of the road, which is not terrible, but also not as stellar as Texas Tech.
Yeah, we'll talk about Texas Tech in just a minute, but some programs that aren't necessarily feeling the love. Maybe these are our Bob Cratchits to keep it on Christmas, struggling with Ebenezer Scrooge down there at Texas Tech. Some programs that aren't doing very well or struggling right now in the portal.
Yeah, Kansas State is your Tiny Tim. I'll put it though. They're your cripple of the Big 12 right now because they do need to reload a bit and create a better roster next season because I thought they underperformed at 8-4 this past year and fizzled out. We talked about 7-1 Kansas State. What can they do down the stretch? The answer was not very much. Finish 8-4. And while they have Gabe Powers coming in, an all-star linebacker from Ohio State, outside of that, they're 14th in the Big 12 right now in the transfer portal. At the time of recording, 7 incoming transfers. That can certainly change for Chris Kleiman, and I do believe with your quarterback returning, Avery Johnson, building a solid core there at Kansas State. Hopefully we see Dylan Edwards come back as well, and now we're talking this JUCO rule that's thrown everybody for a loop, where if you were a JUCO player originally, you still have that eligibility. For Kansas State, they need to navigate that quickly. Again, at 14th, I don't like where they are. I'm also a little leery of TCU, sitting at 10th in the conference after what they thought was a tumultuous 8-4 season, a really tough start, blowout loss to SMU. They picked up a couple of 4-star guys. Jordan Dwyer is the one that I've circled at wide receiver. Pimpton at tight end is going to be solid for them as well. But I still need to see TCU elevate itself above that 10 spot. And obviously for Kansas State, elevate itself above 14. Then you look at the spattering of UCF or West Virginia, who are going through coaching changes, and it's going to take them a bit to get off the ground in the transfer portal. And I expect them to end better than 16th. That's where West Virginia is right now. UCF sits at 12th, which isn't terrible a week into their new coaching regime. But for the schools with new head coaches, I get it. Give them a little bit of time. They're going to need a little bit of time. But I hope they're in a better spot. Here come a couple weeks.
So I want to ask about Texas Tech, but quickly, but when we recorded last week, we didn't know the Caden Salter news was finalized. Just thoughts on him coming in there. Obviously, they have Juju coming in as a true freshman as well, but thoughts on Salter and Juju there next year at Colorado.
How about Colorado in general this season? We've said it every show we've done about the Buffs, but TJ, we could have been more wrong about Deion Sanders even 8 weeks ago, talking about whether or not this team could put it together, and now they're doing it in the transfer portal side. And I think with the addition of not just, like you said, Salter and Juju, but also the addition of the defensive keys like Jaheim Otis coming in. That's a kid from Alabama who will be an instant impact player. That's what I need to see from Colorado. That's the Kansas game where they really got out of whack. How good can their defense be next season? Can they continue to build on the offensive line as well? They've already brought in one 4-star tackle. They got 11 total transfers at the time of recording. That obviously will go up post-bowl game. It won't be the 40 of last year, but I'm excited for cornerback Makari Vickers out of Oklahoma. That's a guy you at Jacksonville State linebacker Reginald Hughes. That's another guy who's instant impact, a 3-star linebacker who's got a lot of experience on the football field. For the Buffs, they're in a spot this year. They don't need 40. They need a solid 20 that plug into areas where they can fill holes. And defensively, while I'm excited about the offensive pickups, Salter's one of those guys. He was really solid at Liberty. I think he'll instantly translate. I'm even more pumped about defensive additions for Colorado and Deion Sanders.
Lastly, the team that, like we said, is Ebenezer Scrooge, just grabbing absolutely everything and laying waste to the portal, is Texas Tech. True or false, they're a competitor in the Big 12 with their pickups this year.
Greedy. This is the school that I liken to a TCU. I say, TCU, why aren't you doing this? Kansas State, why aren't you doing this? That pool of 8-4 teams from the Big 12 that had the opportunity to go into the portal and find not just plug-and-play guys, have some positive attrition, but to go over the top. Let's get greedy and grab 4-star players. Oh, we lost our 5-star wide receiver because he was a prima donna. Great. We'll go get 4-star wide receiver, 3-star wide receiver. How about a couple 4-star defensive linemen or defensive ends? That's what Texas Tech is doing. And what they'll ultimately do, TJ, is create competition. Joey McGuire's bringing these new guys in and saying, look, you might not be a starter day one. Hey, for you guys who have been here for 3 years, compete, because those new guys might be a starter day one. When you've got that kind of culture, a culture of competition, you can mold a college football team that competes. Texas Tech is a top 5 team in the Big 12 next year. year based on roster alone. Can Joey Maguire actually win with it? That's a question we're going to have to answer in 2025, but at least he's got the horses in the stable. Today's show is brought to you by GameTime. The Avid brothers are playing a New Year's Eve show at Bojangles in Charlotte, North Carolina. While you may not care, I do care. So I went to GameTime and said, hey, could you help me get some tickets? They gave me the lowest price, guaranteed. With GameTime, you have a curation with GameTime picks that makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy that you like. It tracks what you want to go to. All-in pricing, toggle the feature, show the total upfront, no surprise fees at checkout. Get a panoramic seat view as well from your seat in the app before you buy. Lowest price guaranteed, or GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference. With GameTime ticket coverage, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Utilize GameTime. Download the GameTime app. Create an account. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? Game time.
Drake, is it time to put to bed the rumors of Deion Sanders possibly leaving Colorado after this year?
Absolutely. Deion saying put. There is no way in my mind that Deion Sanders leaves Colorado this offseason. I don't care what NFL job opens. I don't care if it's the Raiders. I don't care if it's the Dallas Cowboys. I think twofold. One, there won't be an NFL organization who is structurally sound that takes a chance on Deion. Why? Been a very, very successful head coach at the collegiate level. When we look at recent players who have become head coaches in the NFL, a lot of them are falling flat on their face. It's not an indictment against Deion. It's a chance you don't want to take if you're a GM that can't afford to take a chance. And that's the case for many GMs who are watching their teams lose so much that they're replacing a head coach. And past that, Deion is already building a roster for next season. He's already plugging in quarterbacks for next season with a Salter commitment. He is already putting together elite defensive players for the Buffs next year. I don't think, and Buff fans, this is where I want to come to you and say, hey, look, sorry that we were so not anti-Deion Sanders, but questioning whether or not he could win earlier this season. Sorry we did that. We were wrong. My foot's in my mouth. But if you truly trust Deion Sanders as someone who molds players, who molds young men, and who keeps his word, then you should wholly trust this offseason. Based on his rhetoric, he's not going anywhere. I believe the move would have already been made. Sorry there, TJ. I believe long pregnant pause there for me. I believe the move would have already been made, or you would hear inklings of Deion Sanders leaving Colorado. If you're a Colorado fan and you trust what he said, trust that he will be in Boulder next season.
Do you think some of the narratives or some of the stories that we hear from the four-letter network and other First Take, this, that, and the other, I'm not trying to get called out like Kirk did by Shannon Sharp, but do you think some of the narratives might die down around that?
No. I mean, think about this. So it's the same reason you and I are talking about it, TJ, but what we're doing is pumping up Deion Sanders as a football coach and a molder of young men. What I want to emphasize is that, yes, there is plenty of content from both of us and creators out there who actually care about college football that want to celebrate what Deion has done. From an HBCU to Colorado, taking HBCU transfers and giving them a chance to win the Heisman Trophy at Colorado, who's not known for its Heisman Trophy winners. We need to celebrate that, not mar this in controversy that a new head coaching job is open. The Las Vegas Raiders. Will it be Deion Sanders? Stop. The headline should be Deion Sanders is staying put at Colorado until that's proven otherwise. I don't think it will be, but we've talked about it all week. We'll continue to talk about it. The four letters will say whatever they want to promote anything but the goodness of college football. Only clicks and controversy. And as long as that's the case, it's not worth turning on.
Yeah, they certainly do it from an angle of they don't love the sport like we do. They don't, Well,
TJ, think about it. There's going to be a comment. It's like, well, you don't want ESPN talking about it. When you guys are talking about it. Yes, for promotion of the sport, not for promotion of ourselves, because I do believe Deion Sanders is right for Colorado. You're not going to get that when you turn on First Take.
Yeah, how many times does Coach Prime have to say no before they stop? It's what's the line from Mean Girls? The limit doesn't exist. What are your thoughts on just the way that he is building this roster compared to his time at Jackson State, and kind of thinking that probably lends itself to him staying as well?
That's such a big part of this for me is the end of his tenure at Jackson State. He wasn't sitting there blowing hot air up the skirt of his team or national media, who was covering Deion Sanders pretty closely at the time, by the way. And TJ, I love that you've blown up the screen here in my nutcrackers. I'm back in my childhood bedroom visiting the family for the weekend. And I do believe that Deion Sanders at Jackson State didn't give you a false rhetoric at the end that, I'm going to build a roster to compete for a national championship next year. And my son and I are coming back. And Travis Hunter's going, no. You knew when the end was near for Deion because he didn't hide it. And I don't believe at Colorado he would do anything differently. He's attacked the transfer portal. His assistant coaches have as well. And if he was looking for other jobs, he wouldn't be preparing for the bowl game like he is. His players wouldn't be playing in this bowl game like they are. He's had little to no opt-outs, little to no guys entering the transfer portal that were legitimate contenders this season. That all points to their head coach being back. If he doesn't come back, they'll be blindsided. I'll be blindsided. We'll all be blindsided. And that's why I think a guy who has been so adamant about his word and his word carrying weight won't actually leave.
Yeah, the idea to me that he would, let's be honest with ourselves, Shedeur and Travis and anybody considering the NFL, and besides those guys alone, anyone that's playing in a bowl game, Cam Ward, we'll talk about Iowa State here in a minute, anyone that's playing in a bowl game is legitimately risking things to do that. And if Coach Prime was just about to quit in a week, right? The game's on Saturday. If he was about to turn in his whistle on Sunday, it doesn't feel like to me that he would risk those things or that he would be working as hard as he's doing. And so you mentioned it, and I'm just doubling down on your take, but the idea that he is risking that, Shedeur is risking that, and Travis is risking that, just speaks to his one character, which people love to question, and his word. And to me, those are the biggest evidences and why I do think he'll be back.
Yeah, there are already NFL jobs that are open right now. The Chicago Bears could be on the phone with Deion Sanders, and I do believe that was the case. Because of how prevalent social media is today, we would know. Somebody would know. Everything gets leaked, and typically it's an intentional leak. Deion's not flirting with other jobs. We've heard of college coaches who are in that boat. Jim Harbaugh, very early on last year, was rumored, hey, no matter where Michigan lands, he is likely going to at least eye an NFL job and get back there with his brother. Haven't heard that about Deion, and his players are still right there beside him. I'm just, again, I would be very surprised if he makes this move. And maybe the biggest piece of that, outside of just his word and what he's given us, is that he's building a program. The economy of Boulder is seeing a record growth because of one man that is an African-American head coach at Colorado. Something that has not happened before at this level is occurring in that state, in that area, because of Deion Sanders. And I'm not sure if he's ready for that to change. It fires me up the Big 12 has this kind of representation and that Deion Sanders has made this kind of name for himself as a legitimate college football coach and not a carny, not a shtick, not a sideshow, but someone who's going to win football games. After 2 years, I'm confident he's not ready to give that up.
Speaking of that, and speaking of the future, it is very early here on Christmas Eve when we talk about this, but I'll ask you, since we're here talking about it, how much room is there for Colorado, considering what they're losing, which is massive? Yeah. How much room is there for them to grow in the Big 12? Well, you mentioned him building a program. Let's talk about 2025 just very briefly before we go.
Yeah, you lose a quarterback who's the guy's son. You lose a pretty solid defender who's the guy's son. You lose a wide receiver and a corner who are both All-American level, and they're the same player. That's the guy who won the Heisman and Travis Hunter. Without those three next year, it'll be different in Boulder, but a chance for Colorado to show that Deion can win without those guys. And I do believe when he hits the recruiting trail in the portal, all he's got to do is say, I'm Deion Sanders, and I win football games. And that's gonna speak to a lot of players over a guy like Eli Drinkowitz that walks in your living room. He's a smooth talker. He's a very good recruiter, but then Deion Sanders walks in with Super Bowl rings and says, come play at the highest level. We're going to have fun while we do it. We're going to win, and I'm going to get you to the NFL. That's a guy who can win a ton of recruiting battles this offseason. He'll do it in the transfer portal, and next year, Colorado's a top 5 team again in the Big 12. They will vie for a Big 12 title, and I would say very confidently, go even without knowing the roster, just given what Deion did in year 2 to turn this whole thing around, they will be vying for a Big 12 title in that conversation by the time week 14 rolls around.
All the narratives were that he couldn't win in Colorado. It is, I mean, I'm predicting the future right here, right? There's my crystal ball. All the narratives now are going to be that he can't win without Shedeur and Travis. Mm-hmm. And it is going to be fun to watch Deion absolutely just lavish and enjoy all of that talk over the next 9 months and then go out and prove people wrong.
Yeah, we were wrong. I mean, I won't completely speak for you, but I know we recorded a show a couple weeks in that said, shoot, is this experiment going to work out? And come to find out, it wasn't even an experiment. It was a confidence in Deion that worked. And my foot's in my mouth. The better he is, I think the better that we all do in college football as teams that aren't considered as your Alabamas or Florida States help grow the game.
Drake, where can people follow you? Where can they find your work?
At Ella Big 12 or at Drake C. Toll on Twitter and wherever you find your podcast with Locked On Big 12.